Okay, so many of you guys have been asking me to give you a little bit more of an explanation of what's actually happening here in these books that we're reading from the Odyssey. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a read through, and every couple of stanzas maybe I'm going to pause and tell you kind of what's going on and how we know that. And this is just here to help you with your test or with something else that you might be working on. I just want to help you figure out how to read a text like this, because this is a very canonical text that you will be expected in college to have at least some knowledge of. This text is referenced in Shakespeare, it's referenced in movies and videos, YouTube shows, all sorts of stuff all over the world. So I do want to make sure that you guys understand this. So we're going to start here with Book 9, In the One-Eyed Giant's Cave. And it begins like this. Odysseus, the great teller of tales, launched out on his story. Alcinous, majesty, shining among your island people. What a fine thing it is to listen to such a bard as we have here. The man sings like a god. The crown of life, I'd say. There's nothing better than when deep joy holds sway throughout the realm, and banqueters up and down the palace sit in ranks, enthralled to hear the bard, and before them all, the tables heaped with bread and meats, and drawing wine from a mixing bowl, the steward makes his rounds and keeps the wine cups flowing. This, to my mind, is the best that life can offer. This is Odysseus just kissing butt. This is Odysseus saying, oh my gosh, you amazing king. You absolutely perfect person. You who are hosting me. Here's a bunch of compliments. You shine out among your people. You have this amazing bard, aka me, Odysseus, here to sing like a god. You have this deep joy in all of your people that holds sway throughout the realm, meaning everyone feels it and this happiness controls everything. Everyone in your palace sits in these ranks and they are all just so excited to hear this person sing. And before them, oh my gosh, there's just so much food, bread and meat and wine and everything that you can imagine. In my head, Odysseus says, this is really the best that life has. This is everything life should be. You are an amazing host, thank you. But now you are set on probing the bitter pains I've borne, so I'm to weep and grieve, it seems, still more. Well then, what shall I go through first? What shall I save for last? So his host, Alcinous, has asked Odysseus to tell him of his travels. Odysseus, of course, is fairly famous. He's pretty well known. And when Alcinous finds that out, he says, tell me, where have you been the last 10 years? What's been happening? We haven't heard anything from you. And Odysseus says, now you are set. You have decided that you need to probe the bitter pains, that you need to go through and interrogate and question all of the problems that I've gone through, everything I've experienced. So I'm going to be here and I'm going to cry. I'm going to weep and grieve. You're going to make me relive these memories again and again, things that I've already experienced, things that I put behind me. You want to hear about them. Okay? Fine. What do I do first? What do I do last? What pains! The gods have given me my share. Now let me begin by telling you my name, so that you may know it well, and I, in times to come, if I can escape the fatal day, will be your host, your sworn friend, though my home is far from here. I am Odysseus, son of Laertes, known to the world for every kind of craft. My fame has reached the skies. sunny Ithaca is my home. Atop her stands our sea mark, Mount Naraton's leafy ridges shimmering in the wind. Around her a ring of islands circle side by side. Dulacaion, Same, wooded Zacynthus too. But mine lies low and away, the furthest out to sea, rearing into the western dusk, while the others face the east and breaking day. Mine is a rugged land, but good for raising sons, and I myself know no sweeter sight on earth than a man's own native country. So he begins. Listen, there are so many bad things that I've gone through. The gods have given me my share of bad things. But before we get into that, let me tell you my name. Because sometime in the future, you might need a friend, right? And if you need a friend, I am here for you. If you need a friend, you just ask for me, Odysseus, son of Laertes. Here Odysseus starts to show his pride as well. He says he's known to the world for everything, every kind of craft. He's known for his wisdom, he's known for his building, he's known for his strength in battle, he's known for everything, according to him. He says, my fame has reached the skies. He's so famous everyone, even the gods, know about him. The rest of the stanza is him explaining his home, Ithaca. Ithaca has a mountain, or Mount Naraton has different islands. Dulacaion, Same, Zacynthus all have these beautiful things about them. But Ithaca doesn't. Ithaca is low. It's really close to ocean level. It's really far away. It's out to sea. And it's rugged. It is not a happy place to be. Odysseus describes it as good for raising sons, meaning it's kind of a rough land that you want sons to grow up on so that they become strong. And he kind of admits, okay, Ithaca is not the best place on earth, but there is no sweeter sight than someone's own country. There's no feeling like being home. There's no place like home. That's what Odysseus is saying here. And he's still trying to figure out where he's going to start his story. True enough, Calypso, the lustrous goddess, tried to hold me back deep in her arching caverns, craving me for a husband. So did Circe, holding me just as warmly in her halls, the bewitching queen of Aea, keen to have me too. But they never won the heart inside me, never. So nothing is as sweet as a man's own country, his own parents, even though he settled down in some luxurious house, off in a foreign land and far from those who bore him. Odysseus is showing off. He's like, okay, let me talk to you a little bit about my adventures. We have a beautiful goddess, Calypso, who wants me for a husband. She had sex with me. She wanted me to live with her and marry her. So did another goddess, Circe, who held me in her halls. She hosted me. She kept me warm and safe and everything. Odysseus is showing off. He's just listing off women who had sex with him, essentially. And he says they never won the heart inside me, because his heart belongs to Penelope, his wife back home. And he says nothing is as sweet as a man's own country. Again, there's no place like home for him. There is nothing that he could do that is as good as home. Nowhere he could go. Even if he had a beautiful, luxurious house in a foreign land, nothing would be as wonderful to him as being in his own home country. This is coming from a man who's been trying to get home for 10 years. Of course, he wants to be home. No more. Come, let me tell you about the voyage fraught with hardship Zeus inflicted on me, homeward bound from Troy. So he gets over, he has told Alcinous about his sexy times with the goddesses, and now he's like, okay, we're good. Let me tell you a good story about some hardship and some adventure we've been through. The wind drove me out of Ilium onto Ismarus, the Cicone stronghold. There I sacked the city, killed the men, but as for the wives and plunder, the rich haul we dragged away from the place, we shared it round so no one, not on my account, would go deprived of his fair share of spoils. So these are real places, as we learned in the History Channel videos, the Clash of the Gods, right? These are places we can find. The issue here is that he has found the Cicones. And the Cicones are not very friendly. They are enemies of Troy. They are enemies of the Greeks. They are enemies of Odysseus. So Odysseus has begun talking about his journey, and he says, oh, okay, so we ended up with the Cicones. And we sacked the city, meaning we pillaged the city. We got all of the valuable things out of the city. We killed all the men, right, because we wanted to kill all of our enemies. Any of the wives and any of the plunder, so the wives and the treasure, the women, the treasure, everything like that, they dragged away and they shared it between them. This becomes important later on in the story, that right now Odysseus is saying everyone got an equal share of the spoils, of the treasure. Everyone got the same amount of women, the same amount of treasure. Everyone got everything. Then I urged them to cut and run, set sail, but would they listen? Not those mutinous fools. There was too much wine to swill, too many sheep to slaughter down along the beach, and shambling longhorn cattle. And all while the Cicones sought out other Cicones, called for help from their neighbors living inland, a larger force and stronger soldiers too, skilled hands at fighting men from chariots, skilled, when a crisis broke, to fight on foot. So they won against this first town of Cicones, and they brought all of the treasure and the women to the beach. And Odysseus says, let's go. He says, cut and run, set sail. Let's put all this treasure on our boats and let's leave. His men, he calls them mutinous, meaning they directly defy his orders. His men refuse to pack up the boats because there is so much wine to swill, meaning to drink. There's so much to drink. There's so much to eat, sheep to slaughter and cattle to slaughter, sheep and cows to kill, right? There's so much to party. Like, they want to have a feast and a party and this big thing on the beach. All while this is happening, the Cicones are finding other Cicones, the ones who escaped. Maybe the children, maybe some of the women got away, maybe some of the men were in hiding. But the Cicones have gone to another town and brought out their allies, people who like them. And so they have gone to get help to drive away Odysseus and his men. And they came. Out of the morning mist, they came against us, packed as the leaves and the spears that flower forth in the spring. And Zeus presented us with disaster, me and my comrades doomed to suffer blow on mortal blow. Lining up, both armies battled it out against our swift ships. Both raked each other with hurtling bronze lances. Long as morning rose and the blessed day grew stronger, we stood and fought them off, massed as they were. But then when the sun wheeled past the hour for unyoking oxen, the Cicones broke our lines and beat us down at last. Out of each ship, 6 men-at-arms were killed. The rest of us rode away from certain doom. Odysseus is, again, kind of building himself up here. He says, okay, we get all of these people showing up. They're giving us blow on mortal blow, right? Mortal meaning deadly. So they are hitting us with killing blows. 2 armies are lined up, battling it out against the ships. So the ships are right behind them. They are on the beach. They have nowhere to retreat besides going onto their ships. Each side is throwing bronze lances at each other. And then when it says, long as morning rose and the blessed day grew stronger, we stood and fought them off, massed as they were, Odysseus is showing off. Massed as they were, he's saying, there were so many of them. You wouldn't believe how many Cicones showed up. And we held our own. We fought them. We won. Well, we didn't win, but we held off a huge army for over most of the day, right? From the morning mist before sunrise to the last working hour of the day, to when you unyoke your cows, your working oxen. So he's saying, even though we were a small army, we managed to hold off a huge army for so long, but eventually they broke us down. On each ship, 6 people are killed, and everyone else, they just run away. They just flee. This is sort of a parable, right? It's sort of like a story within a story. And this scene has its own lesson about moderation. Had the men in Odysseus's group just left after winning the one village, they would have escaped, they would have had their treasure and their women, and everyone would still be alive. Instead, they were greedy. They wanted to party. They wanted to eat everything. They wanted to get drunk. They wanted to have sex. They wanted to do so many things. And because of that greed and that want, many people died. And men have a right to attack other men in this society, but this story is showing us they should only take enough for them, right? They shouldn't take too much treasure. They shouldn't take too much from everyone else, because this is dishonorable. And this is what leads them to the death and the destruction. They want everything, and this causes them to fail. From there we sailed on, glad to escape our death, yet sick at heart for our dear companions we had lost. But I would not let our rolling ships set sail until the crews had raised the triple cry, saluting each poor comrade cut down by the fierce Cicones on that plain. So Odysseus says, okay, we had to run. We had to leave behind all the treasure, get on our ships, and run. But we couldn't go too far away until we saluted everyone who died for us. So the triple cry is a way of honoring the dead. And he says we needed to honor the dead before we left. Then we started to leave. Now Zeus, who masses the storm clouds, hit the fleet with the north wind, a howling demonic gale, shrouding over in thunderheads the earth and sea at once. And night swept down from the sky, and the ships went plunging headlong on, our sails slashed to rags by the hurricane's blast. We struck them. Cringing at death, we rowed our ships to the nearest shoreline, pulled with all our power. There for 2 nights, 2 days, we lay by, no let up, eating our hearts out, bent with pain and bone tired. You're going to notice Zeus does a lot of things in this book, in this entire text. So does Poseidon, so does Athena, and so does Hermes. These are all Greek gods or goddesses, in Athena's case, who are upset, who are angry because of what has happened at Troy. Now at Troy, the Greeks won through the wooden horse, but they didn't make a proper sacrifice to the gods before leaving. And this has made the gods angry. So Zeus keeps sending different winds, and we're going to notice the north wind, the south wind, the east wind, the west wind. It's going to blow them all different ways. The north wind happens to be a hurricane, a super strong wind that forces the group to make landfall, to wait on shore for 2 days, unable to get on their ships, unable to go home, unable to do anything because it's just a hurricane. It's raining so hard. When dawn with her lovely locks brought on the 3rd day, then stepping the masts and hoisting the white sails high, we lounged at the oarlocks, letting wind and helmsman keep us true on course. So after 3 days now they have some favorable winds, they've got some good things going for them, and so they're just kind of like able to relax a little bit. And now at long last I might have reached my native land unscathed, but just as I doubled Malea's cape, a tide rip and the north wind drove me way off course, careering past Cythera. So they're almost to Ithaca. Malea's cape is so close to Ithaca. And Odysseus is like, we're almost there. We're almost there. We're almost there. And then the wind comes back and it drives them away, right? Winds control the ships and the ships are being blown off course. 9 whole days I was borne along by rough, deadly winds on the fish-infested sea. Then, on the 10th, our squadron reached the land of the lotus eaters, people who eat the lotus, mellow fruit, and flower. So the winds blow for 9 days, and they have no control over their ships. Their ships just go wherever the wind goes. It takes 10 days for them to land, and when they do, they land on the island of lotus eaters, people who eat this mellow fruit and flower, so they eat the fruit and the flower, and we're going to learn a little bit about what that does. We disembarked on the coast, drew water there, and crewmen snatched a meal by the swift ships. Once we'd had our fill of food and drink, I sent a detail ahead. 2 picked men and a third, a runner, to scout out who might live there. Men like us, perhaps, who live on bread. So they went, and soon enough they mingled among the natives, lotus eaters. Lotus eaters who had no notion of killing my companions, not at all. They simply gave them the lotus to taste instead. So, they have gotten off of their boats. That's what disembark means, to get off the boat. They drew water, so they get some fresh water to drink. Remember, they've been at sea for 10 days, so they need fresh water. And then the crew gets some food. Once they're full, Odysseus chooses 2 specific men and another man who is a runner, someone who's going to go and find out what's happening, run all the way back to the ships, tell them what's happening, and see if they can go on into this island or not. So they go and they meet the natives. The natives are called lotus eaters because they eat the lotus fruit and the lotus flower. The lotus eaters had no notion of killing my companions. They didn't even think, right, about killing these 3 men. They didn't think that they should have to kill these 3 men. Instead, they give them the lotus to taste. Any crewman who ate the lotus, the honey-sweet fruit, lost all desire to send a message back, much less return. Their only wish to linger there with the lotus eaters, grazing on lotus, all memory of the journey home dissolved forever. But I brought them back to the hollow ships and streaming tears. I forced them, hauled them under the rowing benches, lashed them fast, and shouted out commands to my other steady comrades. Quick, no time to lose. Embark in the racing ships. So none could eat the lotus, forget the voyage home. They swung aboard at once. They sat to the oars in ranks, and in rhythm churned the water white with stroke on stroke. So we have here Odysseus explaining what the lotus does. If you eat the fruit, you lose your memory. If you eat the lotus, you will lose any desire for anything else. If you eat the lotus, you don't care about your family, about your duty, about your job. You do not care about anything except eating more lotus. This is another mini story that's talking to us about the connection between memory and desire. If you forget what you desire, if you forget what you want, you stop doing anything, right? If you get what you want, or if you forget, if you can no longer remember what you want, then you don't do anything. This is also a story warning us about the dangers of drugs. Drugs can make people forget. And when you forget, you stop acting. You stop doing any actions. When you forget what is important, you focus on what is not important. In this case, the men have forgotten what is important, getting home. And instead, they are focusing on what is not important, the lotus fruit. So Odysseus brings them back, right? It says, I brought them back. So he brings these 3 men back to the ships, even though they are crying, right? Streaming tears. They're upset. All they want is to eat the lotus. Odysseus forces them underneath the benches people sit on to row the boat. He lashes them there. He ties them there. This is foreshadowing in Book 12. Odysseus himself is going to be lashed or tied as well. So he ties them there. Now, his crewmates are probably thinking this is a little crazy. Odysseus has just brought back 3 friends who are crying and screaming that they don't want to leave, and he has tied them up on these ships. But Odysseus leaves them no time to think. He says, quick, no time to lose, let's go. Embark in the racing ships, meaning go as fast as you can, as if this is a race. His whole goal is to stop anyone else from eating the lotus. If he loses too many men, then he can't move his boat. Because boats move by two things, the wind and rowing. And one person cannot row a large ship. So he has to have people who want to go. From there we sailed on, our spirits now at a low ebb, and reached the land of the high and mighty Cyclops. This is the main story of the book, the Cyclops. What's important is that spirits are low. People aren't happy. Why would they be? Right? They just spent 9 days being blown around everywhere. They finally landed on the land of the Lotus Eaters. They have crewmen who are telling them how wonderful the lotus is. And they have a captain, Odysseus, who is forcing them to return to the ships. And now, of course they're upset. Of course they're sad. The Cyclops are lawless brutes who trust so to the everlasting gods they never plant with their own hands or plow the soil. The Cyclops are people outside of civilization, right? They're considered outsiders for us. They don't seem to have any sort of their own civilization, right? It says they just trust the gods to provide. They are purely faith beings. They just trust in the gods. They don't plant. They don't farm. They don't plow the soil. They don't do anything to make sure they have food. They just trust the gods. They don't have any farms or councils or anything else. Unsown, unplowed, the earth teems with all they need. Wheat, barley, and vines, swelled by the rains of Zeus to yield a big, full-bodied wine from clustered grapes. They have no meeting place for council, no laws either. No, up on the mountain peaks they live in arching caverns, each a law to himself, ruling his wives and children, not a care in the world for any neighbor. This is going to become important. The Cyclops do not have any social structures. The Cyclops do not care about their neighbors. They will not come to help a friend, even a friend in need. Their whole thing, each Cyclops has their own rules, their own laws, and they control their wives, meaning multiple women, and their children, anyone that is their child. That is the only law they have. Now, a level island stretches flat across the harbor, not close inshore to the Cyclops coast, not too far out, thick with woods where the wild goats breed by hundreds. No trampling of men to start them from their lairs, no hunters roughing it on the woody ridges, stalking quarry, ever raid their haven. No flocks browse, no plowlands roll with wheat, unplowed, unsown forever, empty of humankind. The island just feeds droves of bleating goats. So we get a description of this island. It's flat, right? It's a level island, so it's flat. It's not too close to the Cyclops. It has so many trees. It's thick with woods. It is a forest. And wild goats are there. just having kids whenever they feel like it. There are no men there to scare them, no one to hunt them, no one to cut down the trees. No one ever goes on this island, and it's literally just owned by goats. The goats own everything on this island. For the Cyclops have no ships with crimson prows, no shipwrights there to build them good trim craft that could sail them out to foreign ports of call, as most men risk the seas to trade with other men. Such artisans would have made this island, too, a decent place to live in. No mean spot, it could bear you any crop you like in season. The water meadows along the low foaming shore run soft and moist, and your vines would never flag. The land's clear for plowing. Harvest on harvest, a man could reap a healthy stand of grain. The subsoil's dark and rich. We get a description now, not of the island away from the Cyclops, but the island of the Cyclops itself. The Cyclops do not know how to sail. They have no ships. So they don't care about trade. They really don't care about making money. They don't care about doing anything like that. Odysseus then says there is no mean spot. There is nothing here that would cause anyone any trouble. This island is so great, anything you'd want to grow, you could grow. There's water meadows, like places of fresh water along the shore, and it would water your plants perfectly. There are no real big trees. The land is clear. It could be plowed. If humans were here, a man could reap a healthy stand of grain. They would get harvest upon harvest, or more and more of whatever crop they're growing. Odysseus even says the subsoil is dark and rich. It is super fertile soil here. Anything could grow. There's a snug deep water harbor there, what's more. No need for mooring gear, no anchor stones to heave, no cables to make fast. Just beat your keels, ride out the days till your shipmates' spirits stir for open sea and a fair wind blows, and at last, at the harbor's head, there's a spring that rushes fresh from beneath a cave, and black poplars flourish round its mouth. So, this becomes important. There's a deep water harbor, a place to put your boat, and it's so calm, they don't need to tie the boat up. The boat can just sit there. There is no tides, there's no movement of the water. So you can just sit there with your boat, you don't need to tie it up. This also happens to make for a very quick escape for Odysseus later on. And he also talks about how there's some fresh water here. Well, here we landed, and surely a god steered us through the pitch-black night. Not that he ever showed himself, with thick fog swirling around the ship, the moon wrapped in clouds, and not a glimmer stealing through that gloom. Not one of us glimpsed the island scanning hard, or the long combers rolling us slowly toward the coast, not till our ships had run their keels ashore. Beaching our vessel smoothly, striking sand, the crews swung out on the low shelving sand, and there we fell asleep, awaiting dawn's first light. So Odysseus has told us, okay, when we got there, it was really, really dark. So surely some god We don't know which one, because the Greeks had a lot of them, but surely some god steered the boat so that it would land at this island. And they landed there at night. Their boat just sort of docked itself. All of their ships docked themselves. And they struck sail, meaning they took all the sails down, and everyone gets to go and fall asleep and wait for the next morning. When young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, we all turned out, intrigued to tour the island. The local nymphs, the daughters of Zeus himself, flushed mountain goats so the crews could make their meal. Quickly we fetched our curved bows and hunting spears from the ships, and splitting up into 3 bands, we started shooting. And soon enough, some god had sent us bags of game to warm our hearts. 12 vessels sailed in my command, and to each crew 9 goats were shared out, and mine alone took 10. Then all day long, till the sun went down, we sat and feasted well on sides of meat and rounds of heady wine. So they fell asleep, and when it becomes morning, these nymphs, which are the daughters of the great and mighty powerful god Zeus, the god of lightning, his daughters chase some goats down to the men who are waiting. The men pick up some bows and hunting spears. They split into 3 different groups, and they shoot the goats in order to kill them, right? And he says, some god sent us bags of game to warm our hearts. Some god has given us so much food that now we are feeling better. 12 boats sail with Odysseus. Each boat gets 9 goats, and Odysseus's boat gets 10. That is a lot of meat for these men. Then for a full day, they just sit there and eat and drink. Rounds of heady wine. The good red stock in our vessels' holds had not run out. There was still plenty left. The men had carried off a generous store in jars when we stormed and sacked the Cicones' holy city. Now we stared across at the Cyclops shore, so near we could even see their smoke, hear their voices, their bleating sheeps and goats. So they're drinking some pretty good wine that they have taken when they destroyed the Cicones city earlier, right? And now they can see the other island where the Cyclops live. They can hear them, and they can hear some sheeps and some goats making noise. And then when the sun had set and night came on, we lay down and slept at the water's shelving edge. When young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, I called a muster briefly, commanding all the hands. The rest of you stay here, my friends in arms. So Odysseus keeps describing dawn in the same way. Young dawn with rose-red fingers, right? When the sun rises, it kind of creates this pinkish red spreading across the sky until the sky turns blue. And that's what he's talking about. It's a clear day, right? It's a clear, beautiful day with a great sunrise. And Odysseus calls together a group of his men and says, okay, everyone else stay here. I'll go across with my own ship and crew and probe the natives living over there. What are they? Violent, savage, lawless, or friendly to strangers, God-fearing men? The last time Odysseus did this, it did not work out did not work out for him. The last time he sent people over to go and see who the natives were, the locals, the people who live there, it was the Lotus Eaters, and he had to bring back 3 of his crew, screaming and crying, and tie them up in the boat. Still, Odysseus is a very proud man and very arrogant, so he wants to go over there anyways. He is going to take his own ship and his crew and head on over to see who lives on this other island. Right? Remember, they can see the smoke, hear voices, and hear sheep and goats, but they have not yet seen a cyclops. They don't know it's a cyclops. With that, I boarded the ship and told the crew to embark at once and cast off cables quickly. They swung ashore. They sat to the oars in ranks, and in rhythm churned the water white with stroke on stroke. But as soon as we reached the coast I mentioned, no long trip, we spied a cavern just at the shore, gaping above the surf, towering, overgrown with laurel. And here big flocks, sheep and goats, were stalled to spend the nights, and around its mouth a yard was walled up with quarried boulders sunk deep in the earth, and enormous pines and oak trees looming darkly. Here we get a description of what this cave looks like. There is a large cave right on the shore, near the water. It is overgrown with plants, specifically laurel, and it seems like there are huge flocks, like big groups of sheep and goats set up there to sleep. Around the mouth of the cave there is a yard with a wall made out of rocks, and the rocks are sunk deeply into the earth, and there are trees everywhere. Here was a giant's lair, in fact, who always pastured his sheep flocks far afield and never mixed with others. A grim loner, dead set in his own lawless ways. Here was a piece of work, by God, a monster, built like no mortal who ever supped on bread. No, like a shaggy peak, I'd say, a man mountain, rearing head and shoulders over the world. Odysseus is describing a cyclops. This particular cyclops is a loner. He does not have friends. He does not engage with other cyclops. He doesn't have a wife. He has no children. He is just here doing whatever he wants. He is set in his own lawless ways. He does whatever he wants. Odysseus calls him a piece of work, meaning, ooh, this guy's a piece of work, right? He's kind of tough. He's kind of hard to get along with. He's really difficult. And Odysseus says, by God, he's a monster. He is not like any mortal, not like humans, not like anyone who has ever eaten bread. He's more like a mountain, a shaggy peak. He's so tall, right? His head and shoulders are above the world. He's so tall. Now then, I told most of my good trusty crew to wait, to sit tight by the ship and guard her well, while I picked out my dozen finest fighters and off I went. But I took a skin of wine along, the ruddy, irresistible wine that Marin gave me once. Euanthes' son, a priest of Apollo, lord of Ismarus, because we rescued him, his wife, and children, reverent as we were. He lived, you see, in Apollo's holy grove. and so in return he gave me splendid gifts. He handed me 7 bars of well-wrought gold, a mixing bowl of solid silver, then this wine. He drew it off in generous wine jars, 12 in all unmixed, and such a bouquet, a drink fit for the gods. Remember, Odysseus is telling this as a story. So he makes some asides now and again where he has to explain things. And he says, okay, I told most of the people on my ship to wait. And I took 12 of my best fighters, and we went to the shore. I also took a container of wine. And now he has to describe the wine. It is irresistible, meaning no one can resist it. Everyone wants to drink it. It was given to him by a priest of Apollo and a lord, the prince or king of Ismarus, because Odysseus and his men had rescued them. And now Odysseus shows off again, right? He wants to show off some of the cool things he has. And he says, so I got all these cool presents. Some really nice gold, some solid silver bowls, and this wine. 12 wine jars were full that were entirely unmixed. At this time, you would take wine and generally mix it with water. Later on in this chapter, we're going to hear you generally mixed 1 cup of this wine with 20 cups of water. That's how strong this wine generally is. And Odysseus says it's a drink fit for the gods, meaning it is delicious wine. No maid or man of his household knew that secret store, only himself, his loving wife, and a single servant. Whenever they drink the deep red, mellow vintage, 20 cups of water he'd stir in 1 of wine. And what an aroma wafted from the bowl, and what magic, what a godsend. No joy in holding back when that was poured. So, this wine is so protected that the man, the priest of Apollo, who has it, keeps it very secret. Only 3 people know where he keeps his wine. He knows where he keeps his wine. His wife knows where he keeps the wine. And only 1 servant knows where he keeps his wine. And when they drink it, they take 20 cups of water and put 1 cup of wine in it, and it is delicious. It is the best thing that has ever been tasted by Odysseus. Filling a great goat skin now, I took this wine, provisions too, in a leather sack. A sudden foreboding told my writing spirit I'd soon come up against some giant clad in power, like armor plate, a savage deaf to justice, blind to the law. Odysseus knows, kind of, what he's going up against. He says, okay, I filled this container. It's a goat skin, but just think of it like a bucket or something, like with a lid on it. I filled a container with wine, and then I put provisions in a leather sack. So I brought along some food. Something in me told me that we were going to fight a giant. A giant with so much power, it's like he's wearing armor. But a giant who is savage, who doesn't pay attention to the law. So that is what Odysseus is expecting. Our party quickly made its way into his cave, but we failed to find our host himself inside. He was off in his pasture, ranging his sleek flocks, so we explored his den. gazing wide-eyed at it all. The large flat rocks loaded with drying cheeses, the folds crowded with young lambs and kids, split into 3 groups. Here the spring-born, here the mid-yearlings, here the fresh sucklings, off to the side. Each sort was penned apart. And all his vessels, pails, and hammered buckets he used for milking were brimming full with whey. From the start, my comrades pressed me, pleading hard. Let's make away with the cheeses, then come back. Hurry, drive the lambs and kids from the pens to our swift ship. Pry out to sea at once. So they go inside the cave, but there's no Cyclops, there's no giant. In fact, he's outside, dealing with his sheep and his goats. So instead, our super big hero and his men decide to just sort of break in. They kind of just go inside this Cyclops house. They see all of these cheeses, and the giant has lambs and kids, right? Baby sheep and baby goats. And he's got them split up and organized. One's born in spring, one's born mid-year, and ones that are very, very young. And he's got them separated. So he's pretty organized. And he has everything that he uses for milking is brimming with whey. Now, whey is a product that comes out when you make cheese. It's kind of the watery part that remains after you make cheese curds and press the cheese. Whey you can eat and you can drink. It's totally safe and a lot of people do it. And it says, from the start, my comrades pressed me, pleading hard, let's make away with the cheeses and come back. Drive the lambs and kids from the pens to our swift ship and put out to sea at once. This is different from the Cicones. The Cicones, Odysseus said, hey, let's go, let's get out of here. But instead now, Odysseus's men are saying, let's steal all the cheese and go. Let's take all of these baby sheep and baby goats and put them onto our ship and leave. Let's get some supplies and let's get out of here. But I would not give way. And how much better it would have been, not till I saw him, saw what gifts he'd give. But he proved no lovely sight to my companions. Now, to understand why Odysseus does not want to leave, you have to know something about Greek culture. There is a law of hospitality, meaning that there is this sort of agreement between travelers and the gods that wherever a traveler stops, that person who owns that land has to give them gifts, presents, and has to give them food. So Odysseus says, no, we don't want to steal from the Cyclops. Instead, we want to take away the gifts he will give us. He'll give us amazing, great, wonderful gifts that we've never seen. And Odysseus adds some commentary here. It would have been better if we had just left. And then he also says, this Cyclops was not a lovely sight to my companions. This Cyclops was a problem. There we built a fire, set our hands on the cheeses, offered some to the gods, and ate the bulk ourselves, and settled down awaiting his return. You'll notice throughout the Odyssey, there are a lot of sacrifices to the gods because they did not sacrifice in Troy, right? They made that mistake and angered the gods, So they're trying to make up for it by giving sacrifices and prayers. So here they are waiting. They've stolen some cheese. They're waiting for the Cyclops to come back. And back he came from pasture late in the day, herding his flocks home and lugging a huge load of good dry logs to fuel his fire at supper. So he's come back, he's bringing some wood, and he's bringing back his sheep and goats. He flung them down in the cave, a jolting crash. We scuttled in panic into the deepest dark recess. And next he drove his sleek flocks into the open vault, all he'd milk at least, but he left the males outside, rams and billy goats out in the high-walled yards. So the Cyclops drops all the wood, and the noise scares Odysseus and his men into a corner. Then the Cyclops brings in all of the female sheep and goats, because he wants to milk them. He makes cheese, this is how he survives, so he brings them in to milk them. Any of the male goats or the male sheep, the rams, the billy goats, any of the guys, any of the boys, he leaves outside. Remember, he's got that wall yard that he's made out of rocks, so they can't get away. Then to close his door, he hoisted overhead a tremendous massive slab. No 22 wagons, rugged and four-wheeled, could budge that boulder off the ground, I tell you. Such an immense stone the monster wedged to block his cave. So he goes to close his door, essentially, and his door is this huge rock slab, this huge flat rock that Odysseus thinks no one can move besides a Cyclops. Then down he squatted to milk his sheep and bleating goats, each in order, and put a suckling under each dam. So he milks them, and then he puts the babies underneath them so the babies can eat too. And half of the fresh white milk he curdled quickly, set it aside in wicker baskets to press for cheese. The other half he let stand in pails and buckets, ready at hand to wash his supper down. So he starts by milking all of the sheep and goats. Then half of this milk he makes into cheese, and the other half he saves for him to drink. As soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores, he lit his fire and spied us in the blaze and, "Strangers!" he thundered out. "Now who are you? Where did you sail from? Over the running sea lanes? Out on a trading spree? Or roving the waves like pirates? Sea wolves raiding at will, who risk their lives to plunder other men?" So the Cyclops finishes all his chores, and then he sees Odysseus and his men because he lit a fire. And he lit this bright fire to cook his dinner. Now, the Cyclops clearly has seen people before, and he knows how they get there. He says, "Where did you sail from? Are you coming from the sea lanes? Are you trading? Are you pirates? Are you raiders? Are you here to steal from me? How did you get here?" The hearts inside us shook, terrified by his rumbling voice and monstrous hulk. Nevertheless, I found the nerve to answer firmly, "Men of Achaia we are, and bound now from Troy, driven far off course by warring winds, over the vast gulf of the sea, battling home on a strange tack, a route that's off the map, and so we've come to you, so it must please King Zeus's plotting heart." So first, they're a little bit terrified because this giant man, who's very loud, is yelling at them. Then Odysseus is the one who speaks, and he steps forward and he says, "We're from Achaia. We're coming from Troy. We came here because The winds made our ships go the wrong way, and we're trying to get home. We don't know where we are. We're somewhere off our maps, and so we've come to you because Zeus, who is the protector of travelers, Zeus would like you to help us. Essentially, he's saying, like, look, gods want you to help us. We're glad to say we are men of Atrides Agamemnon, whose fame is the proudest thing on earth these days. So great a city he sacked, such multitudes he killed. But since we've chanced on you, we're at your knees, in hopes of a warm welcome, even a guest gift, the sort that host gives strangers. That's the custom. So Odysseus name drops, is what we'd call this, right? He just says, Atrides Agamemnon, you know, that really famous guy, we're part of his crew. We know him. Agamemnon is like the guy who knows us. He's so famous. But we found you, right? And so now we're here begging you. We're at your knees. Like, first of all, they're literally at his knees. That's how tall he is. But also, they're just saying, look, we are begging. We are pleading. We are asking you to help us. Give us a warm welcome, a guest gift, you know, the kind that you're supposed to give people, the custom. It's part of our culture. You have to give me a gift because you are the host and I am the guest. So give me a gift. This is Odysseus. Respect the gods, my friends. We're suppliants at your mercy. Zeus of the strangers guards all guests and suppliants. Strangers are sacred. Zeus will avenge their rights. So he's like, look, you gotta respect the gods. Those are the guys in charge. We're here, we are pleading, we are begging, we are at your mercy. We are asking for your help. And let me remind you, the big guy, Zeus, king of the gods, god of lightning and thunder and storms, god of the strangers, god of travelers, Zeus, will guard us, because strangers are sacred and strangers have rights. Stranger, he grumbled back from his brutal heart, you must be a fool, stranger, or come from nowhere, telling me to fear the gods or avoid their wrath. We Cyclops never blink at Zeus and Zeus's shield of storm and thunder, or any other blessed god. We've got more force by far. I'd never spare you in fear of Zeus's hatred, you or your comrades here, unless I had the urge. So the Cyclops is kind of like, you are a fool. You are an idiot. You are the dumbest person ever. Or else you have no idea who you're talking to. Cyclops, we don't care about Zeus. Cyclops, we don't really care about Zeus's shield, his thunder, his lightning. We don't care about any of that. Or we don't really care about any of the gods. We are stronger than the gods. We've got more force by far. We are stronger than the gods. He says, I would never spare you, meaning I would never not kill you. I would never let you live just because I'm afraid of Zeus. If I let you live, it's because I wanted to let you live. I had the urge to let you live. And then he changes his tune. He says, but tell me, where did you moor your sturdy ship when you arrived? Up the coast or close in? I'd just like to know. right? This Cyclops is not stupid. The Cyclops is well aware if there are humans here, they came on a ship. If they came on a ship, they can leave. If they leave, if they somehow escape, then he's a laughingstock. So he wants to destroy their ship. Also, there might be more people on that ship, and he likes to eat people. So it's more food for him. So he's like, where's your ship? So he laid his trap, but he never caught me. No, wise to the world, I shot back in my crafty way. My ship. Poseidon, god of the earthquake, smashed my ship. He drove it against the rocks at your island's far cape, dashed it against a cliff as the winds rode us in. I and the men you see escaped a sudden death. So the Cyclops says, where's your ship? And Odysseus is like, broken. Poseidon, the god of the sea, Zeus's brother, god of earthquakes, ran my ship into these rocks, and it broke apart. And myself and these 12 men you see here, we're all that survived. We're the only ones alive. Not a word in reply to that, the ruthless brute. Right? So Odysseus is like, yeah, my ship broke and a bunch of my friends died. And the Cyclops says nothing. So Odysseus calls him ruthless. Lurching up, he lunged out with his hands toward my men, and snatching 2 up at once, wrapping them on the ground, he knocked them dead like pups. Their brains gushed out all over, soaked the floor, and ripping them limb from limb to fix his meal, he bolted them down like a mountain lion, left no scrap, devoured entrails, flesh and bone, marrow and all. So Odysseus is like, yeah, my ship is broken, and all my men but these ones here died. And the Cyclops stands up, says nothing, and just eats 2 men whole. He eats every bit of them. He eats their clothing, he eats their bones, he eats everything. We flung out our arms to Zeus. We wept and cried aloud, looking on at his grisly work, paralyzed, appalled. Right? So they're praying. They're like, God, Zeus, guy in charge of strangers, guy's supposed to be protecting us. Look at what's happening, save us. But nothing happens. But once the Cyclops had stuffed his enormous gut with human flesh, washing it down with raw milk, he slept in his cave, stretched out along his flocks. So he eats 2 people, drinks a bunch of milk, and then falls asleep in his cave next to his sheep. And I, with my fighting heart, I thought at first to steal up to him, draw the sharp sword at my hip, and stab his chest where the midriff packs the liver. I groped for the fatal spot, but a fresh thought held me back. So Odysseus is like, I'm gonna kill him. And then there's this thought that comes through his head, right? There at a stroke, we'd finish off ourselves as well. So I could kill this Cyclops with 1 stroke of my sword into the fatal spot, right in the liver. But if I did that, I would kill myself and all my men. Because how could we, with our bare hands, heave back the slab he set to block the cavern's gaping maw? If we kill the Cyclops, there's no one to open the door. We can't get out. So we lay there groaning, waiting dawn's first light. When young Dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, the monster relit his fire and milked his handsome ewes, each in order, putting a suckling under each dam. And as soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores, he snatched up 2 more men and fixed his meal. He has now eaten 4 men. So he milks his sheep again, he puts the little baby sheep underneath the big sheep, and then once again he eats 2 men. He's now eaten 4 men. Well fed, he drove his fat sheep from the cave, lightly lifting the huge door slab up and away, then slipped it back into place as a hunter flips the lid of his quiver shut. He has locked them into the cave. Now, Odysseus is here because he relied on this Cyclops to respect the same laws that humans respect. He expected that he expected that Polyphemus, the Cyclops, would have some sort of piety, some sort of religion, some sort of fear of the gods, but he doesn't. Odysseus is also here, stuck with all his men, minus 4, because he is what we would call vainglorious. He's looking for glory. He's got a desire to seek adventure, and he really wanted that guest gift. He thought it would be a really good present. So he's here because he got greedy. Now, at the beginning of this book, we had the parable with the Cicones about how being greedy cost them everything. Then we had the story about the lotus eaters, how if you have no desires, you don't do anything. Then we have this story about the Cyclops. Now, they didn't have to go over to this island, but Odysseus chose to because of adventure. They did not have to enter the Cyclops cave, but Odysseus did because of adventure. They did not have to wait for the Cyclops to return, but Odysseus made them because he wanted the gift and adventure. They did not have to stay in the cave because they needed food. They could have stolen the cheese. They did not stay because they wanted to be with the sheep. They could have taken the sheep. They did not stay because the Cyclops was outside. And now they cannot leave because Odysseus is greedy. He wants more adventure. He wants more treasure. He wants more gifts. He always wants more now. And this is causing them to be stuck in this cave. Piercing whistles, turning his flocks to the hills, he left me there, the heart inside me brooding on revenge. How could I pay him back? Would Athena give me glory? So Athena is the goddess of wisdom and of honorable war. And so Odysseus is like, hey, maybe Athena will help me because she is the daughter of Zeus, and Zeus is the protector of travelers, and she is wise, and I'm going to need all my wisdom to get out of this, and she is about honor. And what the Cyclops is doing is not honor. So maybe this goddess will help me. Here was the plan that struck my mind as best. So he's going to tell us his plan. The Cyclops' great club, there it lay by the pens, olive wood, full of sap. He'd lopped it off to brandish once it dried. Looking it over, we judged it big enough to be the mast of a pitch-black ship with her 20 oars, a freighter broad in the beam that plows through the miles of sea. So long, so thick, it bulked before our eyes. This is just a really long description of a tree. The Cyclops has pulled up a tree, an olive wood tree, in order to make a club, but he's waiting for it to dry. It's big enough to be a part of the ship. So this is just a long description of that. Well, Flanking it now, I chopped off a fathom's length, pushed it to my comrades, told them to plane it down, and they made the club smooth as I bent and shaved the tip into a stabbing point. He's made a spear. He's made a long, thick, pointed stick. I turned it over the blazing fire to char it good and hard, then hid it well, buried deep under the dung that littered the cavern's floor in thick, wet clumps. So Odysseus carves it into a spear, and then puts it over the fire and dries it out until the wood gets really, really hard. And then he hides it underneath a bunch of sheep poop, a bunch of dung, a bunch of crap, right? Things that come out of sheep and goats. He's just hid the spear there. And now I ordered my shipmates all to cast lots. Who would brave it out with me to hoist our stake and grind it into the eye when sleep had overcome him? So he's essentially, casting lots is, it's kind of like playing rock, paper, scissors, right? Whoever wins, they are the ones who are going to help him take this stake, this spear, and stab it into the giant's eye. Odysseus doesn't want to force anyone to do anything. So he's having them draw lots so that they don't go, if things go wrong, they don't say, Odysseus, you're the one who made me do this. Instead, they're leaving it up to chance or to luck. Luck of the draw. I got the very ones I would have picked myself. 4 good men, and I in the lead made 5. Odysseus is a good leader. He's going to be in the front. He's going to be the one closest to the Cyclops when they stab him. Nightfall brought him back, herding his woolly sheep, and he quickly drove the sleek flock into the vaulted cavern, rams and all, none left outside in the walled yard. His own idea, perhaps, or a god led him on. So remember, the night before, he left all of the males, the boys, the guys, the male sheep and goats, out in the yard, but for some reason, he's brought them in tonight. And Odysseus says maybe it was his own idea, or maybe some god inspired him. And Odysseus is hoping that Athena has inspired the Cyclops to bring in these rams. Then he hoisted the huge slab to block the door and squatted to milk his sheep and bleating goats, each in order, putting a suckling underneath each dam, as soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores. And as soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores, he snatched up 2 more men and fixed his meal. But this time, I lifted a carved wooden bowl, brimful of my ruddy wine, and went right up to the Cyclops, enticing. Here, Cyclops, try this wine to top off the banquet of human flesh you've bolted down. Judge for yourself what stock our ship had stored. I brought it here to make you a fine libation, hoping you would pity me. Cyclops, send me home. But your rages are insufferable. You barbarian. How can any man on earth come visit you after this? What you've done outrages all that is right. So Odysseus is offering the Cyclops the wine. That wine that we dilute 20 to 1. He's offered this in a bowl to the Cyclops and says, look, I brought this here because I thought you were cool. I thought you were going to be nice. I was hoping you would take pity on me and say, oh, you poor, poor man, here's how you get home. But instead, your rages are insufferable. You are barbaric. You are a barbarian. You are lawless. You are evil. No one's going to come and visit you. What you have done, eating my men, it's an outrage. It's horrible. It's horrific. And it's against anything that's right. At that, he seized the bowl and tossed it off, and the heady wine pleased him immensely. More! He demanded a second bowl, a hearty helping. And tell me your name now quickly, so I can hand my guest a gift to warm his heart. Our soil yields the Cyclops powerful, full-bodied wine, and the rains from Zeus builds its strength. But this is nectar, ambrosia. This flows from heaven. So he's saying, I need more wine. And he gets a second bowl. And then he says, Odysseus. Well, he doesn't say Odysseus. He just says, person, tell me your name. I don't know your name. Tell me your name so that I can give you a guest gift. Right? That's why you're here, for a guest gift. And then the Cyclops talks about the wine that they produce. He says, we have good wine, but this wine that you have given me is nectar. It's ambrosia. It's the food of the gods. This wine is tasting something holy. So he declared, I poured him another fiery bowl. 3 bowls I brimmed, and 3 he drank to the last drop, the fool. And then when wine was swirling round his brain, I approached my host with a cordial, winning word. So you ask me the name I'm known by, Cyclops. So the Cyclops has drank 3 bowls of this really, really strong alcohol. And when he's done, Odysseus comes up to him with this cordial, kind of friendly smile and says, you ask me my name? Okay, I will tell you, but you must give me a guest gift as you've promised. Nobody. That's my name, nobody. So my mother and father call me, all my friends. So Odysseus says, I'm going to tell you my name, but you have to give me the gift you just promised me. My name is Nobody. That's what everyone calls me. My mom, my dad, my friends, everyone calls me Nobody. But he boomed back at me from his ruthless heart. Nobody? I'll eat nobody last of all his friends. I'll eat the others first. That's my gift to you. So there isn't really a guest gift. It's just Odysseus gets killed last. With that, he toppled over, sprawled full length, flat on his back, and lay there, his massive neck slumping to one side, and sleep that conquers all overwhelmed him now, as wine came spurting, flooding up from his gullet with chunks of human flesh. He vomited, blind, drunk. So the Cyclops is so drunk that he has blacked out, he is unconscious, he is vomiting, he is throwing up, he is puking, and he is just passed out. Nothing is going to wake him up. Now at last I thrust our stake into a bed of embers to get it red hot, and rallied all my comrades. So they're getting the stake, the spear they've made, nice and hot so that it burns as well as pierces. And Odysseus gets all his friends together and kind of gives them a pep talk. Courage, no panic, no one hang back now. And green as it was, just as the olive stake was about to catch fire, the glow terrific, yes. I dragged it from the flames, my men clustering round, as some god breathed enormous courage through us all. We are supposed to assume this god is Athena. Athena is giving them courage. They have made a stake, they have made it sharp, they have made it as hard as they can, and now it's glowing hot. It's going to burn and stab. Hoisting high that olive stake with its stabbing point, straight into the monster's eye they rammed it hard. I drove my weight on it from above and bored it home, as a shipwright bores his beam with a shipwright's drill. That men below, whipping the strap back and forth, whirl, and the drill keeps twisting faster, never stopping. So they've stabbed his eye, essentially, with all of their weight. So it's not going to be fixed pretty easy. So we seized our stake with its fiery tip and bored it round and round in the giant's eye till blood came boiling up around the smoking shaft, and the hot blast singed his brow and eyelids round the core, and the broiling eyeball burst, its crackling roots blazed and hissed as a blacksmith plunges a glowing axe or adds in an ice-cold bath, and the metal screeches steam, and its temper hardens. That's the iron's strength, so the eye of the Cyclops sizzled round that stake. So what they've done is they've taken the stake that they've created, and they've stabbed it deep into the eye until the eye explodes. The eye has heated up so much that it has exploded. It has burst open. The Cyclops, loosed a hideous roar. The rock walls echoed round, and we scuttled back in terror. The monster wrenched the spike from his eye, and out it came with a red geyser of blood. He flung it aside with frantic hands, and mad with pain, he bellowed out for help from his neighbor Cyclops, living round about in caves on wind-swept crags. Now this is the time we remember. The Cyclops do not care about their neighbors. They only care about their wives, their children, and their own rules. So he's screaming out for someone to help him. Hearing his cries, they lumbered up from every side and, hulking round his cavern, asked what ailed him. "What, Polyphemus? What in the world's the trouble? Roaring out in the God-sent night to rob us of our sleep. Surely no one's rustling your flocks against your will. Surely no one's trying to kill you now by fraud or force." So the Cyclops do come. They do show up. But they don't open his door. They don't care that much. And they just say, "Dude, what is the problem? What's happening? What's going on? You're making so much noise that we can't sleep. And surely no one is bothering your sheep or your goats. Surely no one is trying to kill you." "Nobody, friends," Polyphemus bellowed back from his cave. "Nobody's killing me now by fraud and not by force." So Polyphemus is like, "Look, nobody, this guy in my cave, has tricked me, is killing me by fraud, has tricked me, and now I am dying." "If you're alone," his friends boomed back at once, "and nobody's trying to overpower you now, look, it must be a plague sent here by mighty Zeus, and there's no escape from that. You'd better pray to your father, Lord Poseidon." So his friends are like, "Okay, if nobody is actually hurting you, then it's gotta be something sent from the gods. And if the gods have sent something to hurt you, you can't really get rid of that. There's nothing we can do to help you. Instead, pray. If you pray to Poseidon, maybe your father, your dad, the god of the sea and the oceans and earthquakes, maybe he'll help you." They lumbered off, but laughter filled my heart to think how nobody's name my great cunning stroke had duped them one and all. But the Cyclops there, still groaning, racked with agony, groped around for the huge slab, and heaving it from the doorway, Down he sat in the cave's mouth, his arms spread wide, hoping to catch a comrade stealing out with sheep. Such a blithering fool he took me for. So Polyphemus, the Cyclops, has removed the door because he thinks the humans are going to try and sneak out. So he is sitting there, waiting for them to sneak out. He's got his arms open to the sides, ready to catch them. But of course, Odysseus is smarter than that. But I was already plotting. What was the best way out? How could I find escape from death for my crew, myself as well? My wits kept weaving cunning schemes. Life at stake, monstrous death staring us in the face, till this plan struck my mind as best. So Odysseus is thinking, and thinking, and thinking. And he's like, what is the best way to get out of here? And he has all sorts of plans. Oh, we could do this. We could do that. But he's trying to find the best one. And so he finally lands on this plan. That flock, those well-fed rams with their splendid thick fleece, sturdy, handsome beasts sporting their dark weight of wool, right? So all of these boys, right? The males, the rams, and the billy goats that have been brought in, they've got such thick fleece, such like fur, like their hair on their body is so thick, and it's so heavy that you wouldn't really notice something underneath it. I lashed them abreast quietly, twisting the willow twigs the Cyclops slept on, giant lawless brute. I took them 3 by 3. Each ram in the middle bore a man, while the 2 rams either side would shield him well. So 3 beasts to bear each man. But as for myself, there was one bellwether ram, the prize of all the flock, and clutching him by his back, tucked up under his shaggy belly, there I hung face upward, both hands locked in his marvelous deep fleece, clinging for dear life, my spirit steeled, enduring. So we held on, desperate, waiting for dawn's first light. So I lashed them abreast just means that he tied 3 of them together. He used the willow twigs the Cyclops slept on. Essentially, the Cyclops has taken a willow tree, made a pile of branches, and that's his bed. So again, Odysseus calls him lawless and a brute. 3 rams together, the one in the middle has a guy tied underneath him. And the rams on either side, those are going to protect that guy so that if the giant decides to reach underneath them, maybe he won't reach into the middle. Okay, that's all well and good, but Odysseus can't really tie himself up to a ram. So instead, he finds the biggest ram he can, the prize of the flock, and he clutches this ram, he grabs on, holds on as tight as he can, and hangs underneath him. As soon as young Dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, the rams went rumbling out of the cave toward pasture. The ewes kept bleating round the pens, unmilked, their udders about to burst. So, of course, the Cyclops can't really milk, because he would have to be able to see. So the udders, the things that fill with milk, these are so full that they can't get any milk out of them. Their master, now heaving in torment, felt the back of each animal halting before him here, but the idiot never sensed my men were trussed up under their thick fleecy ribs. So the Cyclops is feeling the backs of the sheep, of the rams, never even guessing that there's people tied underneath them. And last of them all came my great ram now, striding out, weighed down with his dense wool and my deep plots. So lastly, this big ram with Odysseus on it is coming out. Of course he's last. He is the biggest, but he also alone has to carry a person, whereas the others get 3 rams to a person. Stroking him gently, powerful Polyphemus murmured, "Dear old ram, why last of the flock to quit the cave? In the good old days you'd never lag behind the rest. You, with your long marching strides, first by far of the flock to graze the fresh young grasses, first by far to reach the rippling streams, first to turn back home keen for your fold when night comes, but now you're last of all." So the Cyclops is like, hey, you're normally first, giant ram. Now you're last. What's going on? And why? Sick at heart for your master's eye, that coward gouged out with his wicked crew, only after he'd stunned my wits with wine. That nobody, who's not escaped his death, I swear, not yet. Oh, if only you thought like me, had words like me, to tell me where that scoundrel is cringing from my rage. I'd smash him against the ground, I'd spill his brains, flooding across my cave, and that would ease my heart of all the pains that good-for-nothing nobody made me suffer. So he's like, Ram, why are you last? Are you also sad that my eye got stabbed? You are also sad. And nobody only stabbed me because I was drunk. So it wasn't fair. Then he calls out, nobody has not escaped his death. He's saying this for the benefit of Odysseus and his crew. He's saying it so that Odysseus knows, I'm going to find you. Then he goes back to talking to the ram and says, Ram, if you could only talk, you could tell me where Odysseus and his men are hiding. And then he says what he would do. I'd smash him against the ground, spill his brains, essentially kill him, and that would make me feel better. And with that threat, he let my ram go free outside. But soon as we'd got 1 foot past cave and courtyard, first I loosed myself from the ram, then loosed my men, then quickly, glancing back again and again, we drove our flock, good plump beasts with their long sharks, straight to the ship, and a welcome sight we were to loyal comrades, we who'd escaped our death, but for all the rest they broke down and wailed. So they've escaped. They got outside. As soon as they're outside of the walls, Odysseus lets go of his ram, unties the men. Remember, this is reminiscent of the Lotus Eaters, where he had to tie his men under benches. Now he had to tie his men under rams. And then they take them. They take the whole flock, and they bring it back to their ship. And at the ship, everyone is happy to see them, but sad that they've lost so many people. I cut it short. I stopped my shipmates' cries, my head tossing, brows frowning, silent signals to hurry, tumble our fleecy herd on board, launch out to open sea, right? Now Odysseus is pushing to leave. So this is back with the Cicones, where Odysseus is like, come on, let's go, let's go. They swung aboard. They sat to oars in rank, and in rhythm churned the water white with stroke on stroke. But once offshore, as far as a man's shout can carry, I called back to the Cyclops stinging taunts. So Cyclops, no weak coward it was whose crew you bent to devour there in your vaulted cave, you with your brute force. Your filthy crimes came down on your own head, you shameless cannibal. daring to eat your guests in your own house. So Zeus and the other gods have paid you back. So they've started to leave, and when they get just about as far as Odysseus can shout, Odysseus shouts back and says, "Okay, Cyclops, haha, we escaped. And it's your fault. It's your fault that you don't have an eye anymore, because you ate guests. You ate my men. You ate people coming to you for help." That made the rage of the monster boil over, right? Screaming taunts at a Cyclops, not the best choice. Ripping off the peak of a towering crag, he heaved it so hard, the boulder landed just in front of our dark prow, and a huge swell reared up as the rock went plunging under a tidal wave from the open sea. The sudden backwash drove us landward again, forcing us close inshore, but grabbing a long pole, I thrust us off and away, tossing my head for dear life, signaling crews to put their backs in the oars, escape grim death. So Odysseus has taunted the Cyclops. The Cyclops throws a huge rock at them, and the rock causes a wave that starts to bring their ship back. However, Odysseus grabs a stick and pushes them back to the sea, and now his men are rowing. They threw themselves into the labor, rowed on fast, but once we plowed the breakers twice as far, again I began to taunt the Cyclops. So now they're twice as far away, and again Odysseus, with his pride, with his arrogance, his vainglory, he wants to make fun of the Cyclops. Men around me tried to check me, calm me left and right. So headstrong. Why? Why rile the beast again? So Odysseus is trying to make fun of this Cyclops, and his men are like, "Dude, shut up. Stop it. Stop talking to him. He's going to throw another rock at us." That rock he flung in the sea just now, hurling our ship to shore once more, we thought we'd die on the spot. If he'd caught a sound from one of us, just a whisper, he would have crushed our heads and ship timbers with one heave of another flashing jagged rock. Good God, the brute can throw. So this is Odysseus's men making arguments, and they're like, "Stop talking. Stop it. The more you taunt him, the more he'll throw at us, and he will eventually kill us." So they begged, but they could not bring my fighting spirit round. Odysseus has somehow turned this into a compliment. He says his men were begging, but he's got such a good fighting spirit in him that they can't change it. I called back with another burst of anger, "Cyclops, if any man on the face of the earth should ask you who blinded you, shamed you so, say Odysseus, raider of cities, he gouged out your eye, Laertes' son, who makes his home in Ithaca." Odysseus wants the glory. He wants everyone to know that it was him who defeated the Cyclops. So he says his name, Odysseus. He says his dad's name, Laertes. And he says his hometown, Ithaca. So now the Cyclops knows exactly who this person is. Not just any Odysseus, not just any Laertes' son, not just anyone from Ithaca, but specifically Odysseus, the son of Laertes, the person from Ithaca. So I vaunted, and he groaned back in answer, "Oh no, no, that prophecy years ago, it all comes home to me with vengeance now. We once had a prophet here, a great, tall man, Telemus, Eurymus' son, a master at reading signs who grew old in his trade among his fellow Cyclops. All this he warned me would come to pass some day, that I'd be blinded here at the hands of one Odysseus. Polyphemus had a warning. He had a prophecy. Someone saw the future. Telemus saw the future. And Telemus told him, there's going to be someone called Odysseus who will come and take out your eye. But I always looked for a handsome giant man to cross my path, some fighter clad in power like armor plate. But now, look what a dwarf, a spineless good-for-nothing, stuns me with wine, then gouges out my eye. So the reason Polyphemus was not scared of Odysseus, even with this prophecy, is because he was looking for a giant, another Cyclops. But now it's just this tiny man. Come here, Odysseus, let me give you a guest gift, and urge Poseidon, the earthquake god, to speed you home. I am his son, and he claims to be my father, true, and he himself will heal me if he pleases. No other blessed god, no man can do the work. So Polyphemus is trying to say, like, hey, come over here. If you come here, I'll have my dad send you home. If you come here, I'll make sure you get home. My dad's gonna make me all better. It's gonna be fine. Heal you? Here was my parting shot. Would to God I could strip you of life and breath and ship you down to the house of death, as surely as no one will ever heal your eye, not even your earthquake god himself. Odysseus has made one of the worst mistakes you can make in Greek mythology. He has insulted a god. He has insulted Poseidon, and he has injured Poseidon's son. Now, this wouldn't be that much of an issue if Odysseus were home or had an airplane. But Poseidon is god of seas and earthquakes, and Odysseus is on a ship and needs to be on the sea. He has just annoyed and angered the wrong god, like the only god that he should not have bothered, he has bothered. But at that, he, Polyphemus, bellowed out to Lord Poseidon, thrusting his arms to the starry skies, and prayed, "Hear me, Poseidon, god of the sea blue mane, who rocks the earth. If I really am your son, and you claim to be my father, come grant that Odysseus, raider of cities, Laertes' son who makes his home in Ithaca, never reaches home. Or if he's fated to see his people once again, and reach his well-built house in his native country, let him come home late, and come home a broken man, all shipmates lost, alone in a stranger's ship, and let him find a world of pain at home." This is exactly what will happen to Odysseus. Odysseus will reach home without any of his friends, on a stranger's ship, and when he gets home, he's going to find his wife overrun with suitors, his palace almost destroyed by these suitors, and his son already grown up without him. So he prayed, and the god of the sea blue mane, Poseidon, heard his prayer. The monster suddenly hoisted a boulder, far larger, wheeled it and heaved it, putting his weight behind it, massive strength, and the boulder crashed close, landing just in the wake of our dark stern, just failing to graze the rudder's bladed edge. So he's thrown another rock. But this time the rock landed behind the ship instead of in front. It huge swell reared up as the rock went plunging under? Yes. And the tidal breaker drove us out to our island's far shore, where all my well-decked ship lay moored, clustered, waiting, and huddled around them crewmen sat in anguish, waiting, chafing for our return. So they've made it back to the other ships. We beached our vessel hard ashore on the sand. We swung out in the frothing surf ourselves, and herding the Cyclops sheep from our deep holds, we shared them round, so no one, not on my account, would go deprived of his fair share of spoils. Again, this is foreshadowing. Again, Odysseus is reassuring us he has split the bounty, the treasure, the booty, the prize. He has split it evenly. Everyone gets the same amount. This is Odysseus saying to everyone gets the same amount. But the splendid ram, as we meted out the flocks, my friends in arms made him my prize of honor, mine alone, and I slaughtered him on the beach and burnt his thighs to Cronos' mighty son. So the ram that Odysseus came out on, that's his prize. And Odysseus kills him and makes an offering to Cronos' son, which a lot of the gods and goddesses of the main pantheon in Greek mythology are Cronos' children, but he's specifically talking about Zeus. Zeus of the thundercloud who rules the world. So he made a sacrifice to Zeus. But my sacrifices failed to move the god. Zeus was still obsessed with plans to destroy my entire oar-swept fleet and loyal crew of comrades. Zeus is still upset about Troy. So no amount of sacrifices is going to make it better. Now all day long, till the sun went down, we sat and feasted on sides of meat and heady wine. So they're safe, they're away from the Cyclops, so they eat, they drink, everything's fine. Then when the sun had set and night came on, we lay down and slept at the water's shelving edge. When young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, I roused the men straight away, ordered all crews to man the ships, and cast off the cables quickly. They're leaving, right? They swung aboard at once, they sat to the oars in ranks, and in rhythm churned the white water with stroke on stroke. They churned the water white with stroke on stroke. And from there we sailed on, glad to escape our death, yet sick at heart for the comrades we had lost. So there's a lot of issues here, right? The Cyclops, like I said, are people outside of civilization. They have no law, they have no order, they don't really care about religion. Odysseus has greed and a thirst for adventure that takes over any good sense in his head, and this kills several men. Odysseus is our hero, but he is not infallible. Sometimes he's more sensible than his men, right? Like with the Cicones, he's like, we need to leave, and they don't. Sometimes he's less sensible than his men, like with the Cyclops, where he demands they stay, even though his men say they should leave. Odysseus does regret his actions, so he is learning from them. But remember, he was relying on his own rules, his own culture, something that the Cyclops doesn't have. The Cyclops is not mortal in the way that humans are mortal. He's the son of a god. He's directly the son of Poseidon. Rather than giving guests feasts the way that Odysseus expects, the Cyclops eats them. Odysseus starts showing some good sense, some wisdom, some restraint as he's dealing with the Cyclops. And he doesn't overpower the Cyclops through strength. It's always through his cunning, through his wisdom. He strikes the Cyclops where he is weakness, the eye and the mind. During his plan, Odysseus pretends to be friendly. His cunningness hinges on the giant thinking he's accepted his fate. He gives himself a false name, Nobody, which is trying to show you that Odysseus has some ability for disguise. Even the last bit of his plan is about disguise. The Cyclops only lets them out because he thinks they are rams. Odysseus' initial boast to Polyphemus is pious and careful, right? He says Polyphemus got injured because he defied the gods. But in the second boast, Odysseus gives his name, his dad's name, and the place he's from, which is not giving credit to the gods, right? So Odysseus is not only taking credit and saying, I am the one who dealt out justice, which is what he is trying to do because he has a desire for glory. He's not saying that. He's also, he's saying, I am the one who did it. I deserve the glory. It wasn't the gods. That's his second boast. He also gives his name, which makes him very vulnerable. Polyphemus, who said that he doesn't care about the gods, still believes in his father, Poseidon. He prays to Poseidon, and Poseidon gets to do what he wants, right? Because that is Poseidon's son. Whatever Zeus can do for Odysseus, what Poseidon can do for Polyphemus is better, because that is his son. The children of immortals are not subject to the same requirements as mortals. Odysseus's respect for Zeus, Odysseus's offerings for Zeus, aren't the same as the Cyclops' prayer to his father. This sort of calls Odysseus's free will into question. Is the assault fated? Like, was he supposed to stab the giant in the eye? Or did he make that decision on his own? Did the gods use him just to do what they wanted him to do, so that they could torture him longer? Or did he make the choice to stay on his own? So that is the end of Book 9. Book 9 is all about the Cyclops, but don't forget at the beginning, this is all Odysseus telling a story. This is all Odysseus talking to the person who is hosting him, and this is all Odysseus telling it his way. Polyphemus would tell this story a very different way if we had his writing. So just keep that in mind, that all of this is filtered through Odysseus.